Hey, what's up, everybody? No, hey, what's up? I'm Thomas J. Bellezza, and welcome to The Right Mindset. Today, we are going to go over the next section in Act 1. So, the video before this was Act 1, Section 1, and we went over the 3 blocks that explain the ordinary world. This video will focus on Act 1, Section 2, which is ultimately problems disrupt the hero's life. And we're going to go over a little bit with examples. So, let's do it. A massive thank you to everyone watching this video. As always, I really appreciate it. I do these videos as best I can to really add to the community as best I can. These are just my examples of ideas that I've learned through other authors and myself over my 20 plus years in the entertainment industry as a writer, etc., etc. However, these are just one way to do it, just one perspective of the process of actually being a writer slash author slash screenwriter, whatever you are. So it's just one other perspective you could look at. If you're here for the first time and you're a beginner writer or experienced author, or you write screenplays, whatever the case may be, and you kind of want to learn a little bit about the industry through the eyes of other writers, because I do an interview series called The Right Mindset Podcast, or the videos that you see, and we also break down and analyze story. So hit that subscribe button, tap that bell icon so you don't miss out. As it says, today's lesson is all about Act 1, Section 2, Problems Disrupt the Hero's World. I think we should go over a recap of Act 1, Section 2, because there is the first video in this series, which explains all 27 plot points, and these videos are all about isolating it and focusing on each section. Allergies. All right. There are 3 specific blocks in Section 2. Now, as always, I write down all my notes, I read through them, and then I kind of like riff on them, okay? There are 3 specific blocks in Section 2. Each of these blocks builds on one another. If Act 1, Section 1 is the ordinary world being disrupted by the inciting incident that creates a fallout for that world and the characters within it, Act 1, Section 2 equals problems disrupt the hero's life. Basically, the will they, won't they moment of the story, the emotional reflection of what just happened. Oh my God, where are we going? How is this going to work out? This is also the section of your story where they are dealing with what all happened in Act 1, Section 1. The 3 blocks in this section are as follows. Longer term reflection, basically of the inciting incident, or the pushback against the changes that have occurred because of the inciting incident. The protagonist takes action, or they are forced into action. That is, action to move the story forward. For example, if inciting incident, like somebody's like, oh no, my car blew up. I guess I'm just not going to go to work. I'm just going to go to sleep. And then you just go to sleep and that's the story. But if they're like, the car broke up, what am I going to do? And they make a phone call and it leads to their friend coming over, and then their friend taking them to work is an adventure, and that adventure is the story. That's them taking action, right? Then there is the third block of Section 2, Act 1. There is a consequence to the action that was taken in the previous block, which is the protagonist takes action. Now, by the way, just real quick, the reflection of doesn't necessarily always mean they're thinking. It doesn't mean they're sitting there going, I can't believe this thing happened. I'm very upset about it. Though they could. It could be physical. It could be a representation of the world. It could be internal. It could be spiritual. It could be whatever you want it to be. It's just this section, this plot section, ultimately is saying what are the long-term potentials, or what is the probability of where they will lead or end up because this inciting incident happened? What is the world that, what is it, how is it changing for them right now, even though we haven't gotten to act 2 yet? How is their world changing because the inciting incident happened, and how does it directly affect them or reflect on your protagonist? The That's point 4, by the way, if you're wondering. So point 4 is where the hero reacts to different. But point 5 is the hero decides to take action. Again, this doesn't have to be a moment where the hero, your main protagonist, is like, "Yes, I will take action." Um, it's just that they're either going to accept their situation or they're still fighting their situation, but they're just like, "Well, I have to go along with it. I don't have a choice." Um, and it doesn't have to be a verbal moment like that. It could just be that the story, the next beat is that we're just kind of moving into that world, and that whatever it is they decide to do, it's just this is that moment. If they decide to take the promotion, if they don't decide to take the promotion, that's that moment, like where they're just like, I'm not taking that moment. I'm not taking that promotion. So an example would be they decide to take action to quit their job and finally live the life they've ever wanted to, and they go, "I'm just going to journey around the world," and that's really that moment. Or it could just be like, "Hey, we want to give you the promotion," and the character's like, oh, "Okay," and then the story continues on, and we get to see their world in that promotion. Like, what does it look like now with all these responsibilities, the more money, whatever the case may be, right? But there are consequences to that, which leads us to point 6, the immediate consequences of the actions the hero took. And again, consequences can be good or bad, and it's not, they're not being punished. They could be, but they're not being punished because they took action. You have to look at this point as the immediate consequence of the action. For example, I decide not to take the promotion. I want to explore the world and venture out. So that's the action taken. So what is the consequence? Well, I no longer have a job, but where does that take me in the story? I basically, well, now, how am I going to afford the vacation? How much money do I have? Do I have the money? Do I have the resources? Should I sell my apartment or whatever? Should I get rid of my apartment? Should I? And these are the like, you have to think about these as a writer. Like, what is going to happen because they quit their job so they can travel around the world? Or, you know, yes, they decide to take the ring. They want to take the ring to Mordor. And what is the consequences? And how does that look? We might see that as, I don't know, the scene where Sam goes, "If I take one more step, this will be the furthest I have ever traveled." Or, Frodo going, "I've never really left the Shire." And then, whatever the case may be. Um, those are the consequences. We're seeing the world that it's like right on that cusp of, well, this was the life. These are the things I have to do, and this is where it could lead. Okay. So think of it like that. Which brings me to, I want to give an actual example. I have an example for you. Do you want to see the example? I want to see the example. So let's look at the example. Boom. Look at that. It's like magic. Magic. Look at that. That's kind of pretty. All right. So if you've seen the video before this that goes over Act 1, Section 1, you'll know that we're going over Shawshank Redemption. Basically, what is Shawshank Redemption? How does it look? And what are the beats or the points? And Act 1, Section 2, problem disrupts. One second. Yeah, problem disrupts the hero's life. Point 4, where the hero reacts to and reflects on the long-term impacts of the inciting incident. So I'm going to go back real quick just so you can see the inciting incident. Andy is falsely accused and brought to Shawshank Prison, where Red loses a bet that Andy will break the first night there as a fresh. Okay, so that's the inciting incident. And obviously the reaction to that was, Red was impressed, like, "What's going on here?" Right? And he's like, "I'm pissed. I lost money, but let's see what happens." But the inciting incident ultimately, like, he didn't break. He didn't, not one word. All right. So that brings us to where the hero reflects on the long-term impacts of the inciting incident. So Andy reflects on being at Shawshank and meets a few people there. Everyone at the table deals with their loss of Haywood beating the fresh fish. All right. So basically, that's the moment where he's like, "All right, pay up, give me those smokes." He's like, "Right," and he's like, "I hope you." Right, and then Andy's like, "Yo, what happened to that guy?" And they're like, "Oh, he died." He's like, "What do you care? What do you care?" Right, and it's interesting that he cares, and the Red looks at him about that. He's like, "Oh," and Andy is showing interest in that world. He's more. It's his first seed, by the way, which is another video I you can look up on the channel about seeding or foreshadowing. Is he's basically saying like you're not a prisoner. You're not in this prison. This prison doesn't exist. And that character, though he died viciously, he deserved to be recognized. He deserved. There's something more. And it's that first glimpse of Andy's not really accepting Shawshank. He's not accepting that he's in prison. Okay, so that's that moment where not only is he meeting new people, he's confidently. I wouldn't say confidently. He's he's reaching out to people in a situation where you might be hesitant, but he's like, no, this isn't. I'm not in prison. It may not seem like that, but look at that scene and you'll realize he's, you know, he heard someone died, maybe a colleague, right? Somebody that's on a trip with him, and he's like, "Yeah, I need to know. I need to know." So it's an interesting, nice little beat. But ultimately, as you can, like Andy's not sitting there going, "What's gonna happen with Shawshank? I'm here." We're seeing his truth by showing it, and I know it's a movie, but it's still being shown. Jesus, my allergies are killing me. We're seeing the truth through his actions, through his interests. And even though the words aren't exactly, hey, I'm not in this prison yet, so we're not hearing that. That's the subtext. It's all there. And that's really great writing when you can say a lot and tell the audience a lot by showing it, by letting it filter through motivations or intentions or push and pull conversations. A character being interested in somebody else and their situation says more about that character. That's showing that. Here's a really good example. And I'm sure there's people out there that didn't like the show Miss Marvel. But there's a really great line in that show where how do you be? I'm going to paraphrase it, but the gist of it was how can I be good, right? And one of her mentors was like, being good isn't something you are; it's something you do. Right? I'm definitely butchering it, but that moment is so true for writing. Where if you want like a good character, like a kind character, be kind. If you want a character that is a leader, take lead, be a leader. By the way, leading isn't taking over. Leading is being someone who inspires and influences others, is someone that takes initiative, things like that. Of course, your definition of leader might be something else, and that's fine too. But and what I'm trying to get to is you have to become the truth you want to see. So this is a great example in this little moment. This is point 4, where we're seeing Andy doing what it is he is, what his motivations are. He's doing his motivations. He's doing his perspective. It's important as a writer to remember, how do I represent through presentation the things that my character wants, is, or cares about, right? I don't have to tell you I like Diet Cherry Pepsi, and I wish we were sponsored by Pepsi. It just so happens to always be the drink I'm drinking. I also make that joke almost every time because, hey. But the point is, if my character was always drinking Diet Cherry Pepsi, and it wasn't really something that was super important, but it's like, oh, Thomas gulping at his Diet Cherry Pepsi, goes on about the lesson for Act 1, Section 2 to his audience, looking into the camera as he pre-records his YouTube videos, right? if we constantly see me as a character with the the diet cherry Pepsi, you're diet wild cherry Pepsi, you're gonna know. Oh, great! But I don't have to tell you that I don't ever have to tell you I like this. I can, right? But how often do we tell our friends? They're like, "Oh, what drink do you want? Oh, can you get me a diet cherry Pepsi, please?" Yeah, yeah, no problem. Or I'm always drinking diet cherry Pepsi, and then someone's like, "Hey, I'm gonna get some food. You want anything?" And like, "Yeah, I'll take a meatball hero or a chicken cutlet palm," and then they come back also with my soda. And I didn't ask for it, but they remember. And I go, "Oh, how'd you know I like?" Oh, well, you're always drinking it. That's what writing is. That is the show. Is do the truth. And though that's a whole other video. Let's keep going. All right, the hero decides to take action. So Andy is approached by the sisters and does not engage with them. Red, which should be capitalized. Why is it not? Again, we are writers. Writers. That's why we have editors. All right. Red, get. By the way, don't let anyone ever make you feel like you're not a writer because you have difficulty spelling or your grammar's off. Writers write, editors edit. You can be a writer editor, but editing comes later. And sometimes you miss it that's why you're supposed to print it out. That's a whole this video, but that's why you print it out. That's why you look at it. You have to change the medium to change your brain so it doesn't see the consistency. You break the consistency of what you've been looking at. Anyway, that's my moving on. Andy is approached by the sisters and does not engage with them. Red gives Andy a heads up about the sisters, and Andy does not seem concerned. So again, Andy doesn't have to say, um, I don't like the sisters. I'm not going to go after the sisters. They could try, but I'll take them out. The scene is basically, hey, the sister, be careful. The sisters have taken a liking to you. I'm paraphrasing. Have taken a liking to you, and Andy's like, would it help if they knew that I wasn't gay or whatever, like that? And it's not about that or something like that in the prison. But when he is approached by the sisters, he just walks away. He's like, I'm good, right? He's taking action. He's avoiding the situation, right? He's not necessarily stopping the situation. He's avoiding the situation. So that's an inactive moment. That's very passive character, which by the way fits his traits because he's very quiet. He's very to himself. So that's interesting, right? So the hero decides to take action. Doesn't necessarily have to be verbalized. It's just, what are we seeing? We're seeing that his action is avoidance, and that obviously leads to what? The immediate consequences of the actions the hero took because he's avoiding them and not really stopping them or accepting it. Andy accepts he is going to be there, so he wants a rock hammer, which leads to him being jumped by the sisters. So there's a couple interesting moments here. The immediate consequence of the actions taken is that the hero decides to take action. Basically, we learned that Andy is talking to Red, right? We know that they're friends. He's sort of like, let me make a life in this prison. He's taking the action of, you're my friend. I want to be friends with you. What's your deal? Blank, blank, blank. All right. And also we had this other plot point, the subplot that the sisters want Andy. So the immediate consequences is one, Andy feels comfortable enough talking to Red. Hey, why did I call you Red? I think it's because I'm Irish. And then he's like, I want a rock hammer. By the way, he's not getting a rock hammer to escape. That's a result of wanting another thing, his other motivation, which is he wants to he's a rock. He makes, he finds rocks. He likes rocks. He wants to, and then he makes chess pieces. Just so happens it leads to the idea that maybe I can escape, right? But the rock hammer is a sense of, I'm going to find things that make me feel like me that I did outside of the prison, which I think is almost discussed in that moment where he's like, on the outside, it was a hobby of mine that I like rocks or whatever. But the sisters, because he turned them away, they decide to beat him, and they're like, and there you go. Problems disrupt the hero's life. I hope those examples helped a little bit. Now I'd like to and obviously if you have questions about that, ask me in the comments below. I will say this though. Um, the good news is that this section does uh, contain elements of importance, right? So there's elements that you should have in this section, right? You could have fun with this section. You are able to add some subplots to this section. So, for example, with the Shawshank Redemption, we added the subplot of what? The sisters. Another subplot might have. Oh, the other subplot is obviously Andy escaping. You're like, Tom, that's the main plot. The main plot is actually that Andy believes he's innocent. Um, and he was falsely accused. Then Tom, I think his name's Tommy. Tommy comes in and he turns out to be the guy who was in a cell with the person who actually murdered Andy's wife and lover. And it's like, oh, a way out. And Andy's like, oh, I can finally get out. That main plot of will Andy live out the rest of his life in prison under false accusations, or will he get out? And then once Tommy's killed, Andy's like, that's it. This is my life. I'm done. I'm going to be here. And then he's like, he tells he's like, wait a minute. I'm not a prisoner. And if I stay, I'm not going to make it. I'm going to get busy living or get busy dying. And the subplot is that he was slowly finding a plan B to get out of prison. But the A plot was that, I'm falsely accused. I don't think I did it. And I would like to get out of here. The reason that's a subplot is because that rock hammer is a subplot. And the rock hammer leads to the escape plan. The main plot was not to escape. That makes sense. All right. Anyway, the other thing is you could add more details on expanding the main plot, which is, by the way, accepting his life here and trying to not feel like a prisoner and allow his hobbies to be a part of it. Like, let me try to make my real life as real as possible. One thing you should keep in mind is that even though this is the section where a protagonist takes action, does not, I've said this several times through this video, it does not have to be physical action. Think of taking action as making a choice or being placed into action to make a choice that will lead the plot forward, or plots, meaning the subplots of the main plot. Things to think about when working out this section of your story. This section really gives you a chance to define characters, especially the main protagonist. Think about it. How your characters react, reflect, take or don't take action, and of course, deal with the consequences of those actions says so much about your character. We know a lot that Andy's smart, but we really realize that he's smart because he knows things that are just kind of interesting. He's somebody that absorbs stuff. He knows tidbits. How? Well, when the sisters are trying to take, he goes, "Go ahead, anything you put in my mouth, I'm gonna bite down." And it takes a fire thing to prior. And he goes, "How do you know these things?" He goes, "Because I read." Do you read? Do you read? Are you stupid? Right? Anyway, give these moments, these plot beats, these points, some time to breathe with enough detail to influence the future of your character's choice. Mostly because Act 1, it's the ordinary world, problem disrupts heroes, and then Section 3 is going to be life changes direction. You want to allow this to kind of build that world. This is where a lot of the world building is, a lot of character motivations, your promises to the story, the author's promise to the reader, your themes, your elements, things like that. All that is so you're allowed to kind of like fluff it out a little bit and let it breathe and let moments kind of happen, right? It's like the ascending act 2, ascending conflict to conflict, and then descending conflict is when it gets a little faster, and then act 3 obviously is really fast. Anyway, the other thing is like I said, give this time to breathe a little bit to influence the future of your characters' choices. Some of those characters are basically how they react now can either be what leads to them to do what they do in the end of your story, or show the audience a character before their growth by the end of the narrative. Great example with Andy is he's evasive. The sisters want him. He's like, I'll just, sisters try to get him in the shower. He's like, I'm just going to go, right? He just avoids. He doesn't really take action per se. There is the seed, the one moment where they're on the roof and he's like, "Hey, do you trust your wife?" He took action there, right? He took a step forward. Now, obviously, we find out that he wanted to do it to feel normal a little bit and whatever the case may be. But he took action. Not enough action to make a major change, right? Because he was still in the environment, his new world. Uh, but it gives us, the audience, that little bit taste that, oh, all right, Andy's willing to do what he has to do by the end. And I believe that's in him. It's just not fully out of him in the beginning. Like this is only section 2. We're probably maybe 10, 15 minutes in, maybe. So, final thoughts, anyone? Yeah, of course. The beginning of the story carries the most weight. It's common for Act 1 to be easy to write. Why? This is the chunk that all writers get to play with. The world building, the main plot line, and by the time you get to Act 1, Section 3, which is the next video in the series, you're going to open the doors to the new world. Traditionally, Act 1 is filled with the most information with a highly condensed collection of pages, right? So think of movies. The first act is pretty packed with information. The audience needs to learn a lot before we can even get into Act 2, let alone Act 3. Why is that? Well, that's a good question. Tom, why is that? Well, let me tell you. Basically, Act 2 and Act 3 are impacted by how much we know about the plot, subplots, characters, motivations, themes, and overall point of view of the story. Without establishing certain elements in Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3, they will be the weak links in your story. Use each section of Act 1 to solidify what is needed to go and take on the story from your character's point of view. I hope that really helps. So in the next video, like I said, we will conclude Act 1 with Section 3, which is the hero's life changes direction. Ooh, I said direction, not erection. Stop it. Perverts. Question: what have you ever read that made you think differently about fiction? Let me and the community know in the comments below. I'll repeat that. What have you ever read that made you think differently about fiction? Take that question however you want. I don't want to add some influence or bias to it. Just listen to the question, answer it. I just like to hear your mind. Let the community and me know, and boom, boom. Hey, by the way, if you want to learn a little bit more about improving your craft, insight to the industry, and of course, hearing from fellow authors during the Right Mindset podcast, please subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out. And as always, remember, the whole point of this is to always be developing the right mindset. I'll see you next time.